All right, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to 3CNC's online webinars. My name is Jack Hernandez, Marketing Director here at 3CNC, and I'll be your presenter today. And I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules and being with us here today, as we'll be discussing how to recover your data after a disaster and why a backup and disaster recovery solution is so important to businesses of all sizes. Please feel free to send me your questions using the chat feature, and I'll address them right after the presentation, and then we'll be giving our giveaway away. All right, and before we get started, I would like to tell you a little bit about 3CNC, 3C Network Consultants, for those of you just getting to know us. And we're a managed service provider, and we've been around since 2001, serving South Florida. Our team's comprised of computer scientists and engineers. For those of you in the medical field, we're also certified HIPAA security professionals. A few services that we offer are cloud, our proactive network monitoring, BDR, or backup and disaster recovery, which we'll be discussing today, and network protection and security. Okay, so let's take a look at our agenda for today, and we're going to cover a set of goals a little later on, some important definitions, then review sources of data loss with examples, break down the cost of downtime, go through the solutions, and then our question and answer session before the free giveaway. Okay, so let's define our goals, and of course, we want to minimize downtime, which can be critical to the survival of your business. In order to do that, you need a solution that allows you to recover as quickly as possible and ensures that you never lose critical data in the event of a disaster. One of the most crucial parts of a business continuity plan is your IT. And I need to stress that a business continuity plan is very involved, and IT and BDR are just a small yet very important facet of the business continuity plan. With that being said, unfortunately, only a third of organizations out there feel that they have everything they need for a potential disaster. That's an underwhelming amount, just a third, and that includes corporations, small and medium-sized businesses, for the most part, are not prepared for a potential disaster. And we'll get into the repercussions of that in the slides to follow. All right, so what most of us are looking like, two-thirds, the majority of the population is going to be like this following comic I'm going to read to you guys. I think we may need to update our disaster recovery plan. This one suggests we all run around in circles shouting, what do we do? What do we do? And a lot of us aren't sure. We think it's a very technical thing. The BDR, backup disaster recovery, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it, but we're going to get into it and see just why it is so important. Right, and then we're going to get into some numbers now. You can read these numbers. These stats aren't intended to scare you, but they're just intended to show you how common it is to lose data and how strongly it can impact your business. All right, now let's get into a few sources of data loss and look at some examples as well. And you may ask yourself before that, what is the most common source of data loss? And that's going to be equipment failures. Office machinery like servers, desktops, fax machines, phones, amongst other pieces of equipment are inevitably going to fail at some point. It could happen on its own or accidentally. And if you want to read some of the stats there, 70% of business people have experienced data loss due to accidental deletion, disk or system failure, viruses, fire, or some other disaster. That's going to lead us into the next, and keyword being accidental deletion. That's going to lead us over to our next topic, which is the second most common cause of data loss, and that's human error. Human error is a source of most data loss, honestly, and a shocking 32% or a third of data loss is caused by it. This all happens because of the key word, and that's human. Sooner or later, we'll all make mistakes, and that's why it's so important to make sure that we're prepared with a proper reinforcement, and that being either backup or BDR, backup and disaster recovery. All right, and let's look at some other disasters, and let's start here with third-party failures, such as electrical power, phone service, FPL, your phone service, Comcast, and so on. Business nowadays relies so heavily on these third parties that just one of these services being messed up for whatever time being, and which is inevitably going to happen, as is human error, it can cause a world of downtime, have you out of business for hours, days, and even weeks at a time. And and we can't forget about hackers, which have victimized the largest of companies, and that includes Target, Michaels, Neiman Marcus recently, right? And so no one is safe. Man-made disasters such as fires, plumbing issues, gas leaks are just a few others. So human error does affect you beyond just the four walls of your office building. It can come from outside forces as well. Right now, do any of you remember Hurricane Andrew to the top left? I do, being a native of Miami, and I could tell you that we lost our homes. My family and I lost our home, and our community wasn't the same for more than a year. In South Florida, the threat of hurricanes is very real, and securing your business critical data should be thought of in the same regard as preparing your house for the storms. So in the same regard that you go out, buy shutters, prepare by buying extra water, a generator, whatever that might be, you should think of your BDR and your business in the same light. All right, and then let's get into this following. Well, here's a couple other examples: Sandy, Wilma, just to show you how common it is. Every year we're facing the threat of these storms. All right, and let's get into this next spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet's basically going to break down the cost of downtime of salaries into simple math. So I want you to keep in mind that these numbers are just salary numbers, and they're pretty conservative at that. We're not taking into consideration incoming revenue you lose, paying rent, among many other costs involved with running your business. I'm sure you know there's plenty. Okay, so we're going to assume that there are 240 working days, and that's excluding weekends, vacations, and sick time, just taking into account with the 240. And we're going to use that number to help us calculate the daily and even hourly costs of downtime in relation to salaries. So let's take a look at the pod or group 1 at the top, and we'll use a medical practice for the sake of this example, right? So we're going to assume with one medical group that there's an administrator who's making $70,000, a staff of 3, which makes $90,000, so roughly $30,000 each, and a physician making $200,000. Again, these are pretty conservative numbers, and these are just ballpark figures. You're going to have to plug in your own numbers and figure that out and take into account all the other costs. But basically with these salaries, we're looking at $360,000 for the year. Now, we break that down into an hourly cost, and that's going to be $187.50. $187.50 is what you're losing on salaries per hour for every hour that you're down, and that's group 1, the smallest and least complex of the groups. All right, so you may ask yourself, what are the most important things to consider when deciding if you're ready for a BDR? And with that, let's look at the second chart at the bottom. And if you take the hourly rate times 8 hours, which is a regular business day, you're looking at $1,500 per day in cost of salaries alone for pod 1, which is the smallest type of pod or smallest type of group. At the end of the week, the practice is looking at $7,500 cost of salary downtime, which is really significant. And as you can tell, there's 4 pods here, so each pod gets more complex. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for backup and disaster recovery. They all have their complexities to them, and the bigger you are, the more complex your system is, the more reinforcement that you need, the quicker downtime, the quicker the snapshots. So that's as you can tell, each group, the price also gets larger as the complexity does as well. All right, so let's get into a couple definitions here to help us understand a little more about BDR. These are 3 of the core definitions, and they're going to be RTO, RPO, and MTO. And these are going to be these acronyms are going to be the technological definitions, but we'll refer to them a little easier as, let's see, RTO is recovery time objective. Recovery time objective is essentially downtime. Look at the time between a disaster and the time that you're recovered, up and running once again. All right, and then RPO is the recovery point objective, and that's a technological term again, and it's going to be the most recent useful backup. And how do you know your backups are being taken correctly and are useful? A lot of companies that offer BDR solutions will take your backups, but expect the client or yourself to make sure that the backups are taken correctly. At 3CNC, we proactively monitor your entire BDR, making certain that your backups are being taken correctly and running fire drills or simulation disasters to assure that our solution is running smoothly. All right, and let's get into MTO, which is maximum tolerable outage. And this is the end of the line, basically game over and bankruptcy, code red, where you're basically out of business, be that days or weeks after the disaster. And let's get into this timeline on the next slide, and it's going to help you, or help me, probably help you as well, understand a little more about the TO, downtime, RPO, the last useful backup, and MTO, the end of the line. All right, so as you can tell, there's a disaster there. You can tell what a disaster is. Disaster strikes, and just after that, you see the RTO line, and that's the amount of time that you're going to be down. And with BDR, that's a matter of minutes or hours. Without it, it could be days to weeks at a time. All right, and then RPO is your last useful backup. Those are the snapshots or the backups that were being taken, and that's the last one that is useful, be it 15 minutes, an hour, whatever your business demands, whatever it is that you purchased as a BDR, that last backup, whether it was, that's going to, basically you're going to have everything that you had saved from that point on. All right, and then there's MTO, which is the maximum tolerable outage, or foreclosure and bankruptcy. And that, as you can tell, that once you get to that line, it's over for the business, and really you got to close your doors and call it a day. All right, so let's get into backup versus backup and disaster recovery. And I'm sure you folks are wondering what the difference is, being that they both have backup in their names. And before we get into the solutions, I want to get into this and let you know that backup is basically the backing up of files. It only focuses on restoring files like your docs, JPEGs, and those are like Word files, your pictures, etc. All the files that go inside your applications, but they don't back up your actual applications or programs. Backup and disaster recovery does. Backup and disaster recovery backs up your entire system, the applications, and the files. So you're backing up your Outlook, you're backing up all these programs, whereas with backup, you have to reinstall these programs while you still have your files saved, but you have to reinstall all these programs from scratch. Backup and disaster recovery is basically a second server where all the applications are already being held. All right, so essentially, when you go from from no backup to backup, it could jump from Pee Wee football to long-time college football. And from no backup to BDR means you're under the lights with the big boys in the NFL. All right, and just a second here. Oh, dude, I didn't expect you to come in right now. My bad. No, it's fine. I'm going to continue real quick. If you don't need to get on the phone or anything right now, right? All right, let me just finish here. Okay, so finally, here are some solutions, and I want to stress that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and the way to really know what fits you best is by crunching all the real numbers, your personal numbers, similar to the spreadsheet we saw earlier, We can also help you with a free assessment. You can find our contact form and on our website, or call us after the presentation. We'll have our number there as well as our email. All right, and we have backup, local only, backup, local, and remote, which is domain backup. Then we have regular domain BDR, backup and disaster recovery, and domain BDR plus. So let's start off with the most basic, and that's backup, local only. Okay, the picture to the left where it has all the PCs linked to the server, that's going to be your network at your office. The backup is going to be a storage device that's on-site. Local means on-site, and that's going to be on-site only, but it's going to be backing up all your files, your docs, your JPEGs, PDFs. And the advantage to that is you have simple file storage, so you have all those files if you need them. It's relatively inexpensive, but it does have a longer recovery time, and the snapshots aren't taken as recently as they would be with BDR. Now, another con is that it doesn't have geographic separation, so if something were to happen to your office, whatever it may be, a disaster, a theft, you lose all your information. And so yeah, let's get into the next solution, which is domain backup. And domain backup is local and remote. So it's essentially the same thing where you have your network and you have a local storage device, which is taking all your files and storing them. Now, but we're going to have a remote backup as well. So we're going to have an off-site backup with some geographic separation, and that's going to assure you that if something were to happen to your physical site, to your physical office, or excuse me, wherever it is that your office is, something were to happen to that location, you have all your files still backed up off-site. So that is an advantage. The only problem is it's not saving all your applications, and it's just files. So you're gonna have to reinstall all the applications and programs. But it is a relatively good solution, and it's definitely better than not having backup at all. All right. The next solution is going to be domain BDR, and we're already getting into a little more assurance and security here for your system. As you can tell, again, there's your network with the PCs and the server. If your server were to fail, your BDR could act as the server, being that it has all the applications already installed. It's basically a picture of your server already in the backup and disaster recovery solution. So if that server were to go down, you have your BDR on site. And this is just the on-site solution. We kick that BDR into gear, and within minutes to a couple hours, that'll be up. You'll be up and running, and it's improved in its recovery time, and it's going to have more recent snapshots. So you're going to have a more recent useful backup. Now, the problem is no geographic separation again, like the first example of backup I showed you, and that theft or disaster could lead to you not having you being out of luck if there's some sort of disaster that happens on site at your physical location. All right, so that'll lead us into domain BDR plus, and this is the optimum package. This is the golden package here, where it's the same thing with this BDR, where you have a local BDR, but now you're also going to have a backup off-site that's going to also be backing up all your applications, and basically it gives you the same advantage as the domain backup, where you have the backup off-site, but now it's more sophisticated. It has a better recovery time, more recent or more snapshots, quicker snapshots, a more recent useful backup. And with the geographic separation, it also has redundancy in that it's constantly copying the entire system. And this is basically the best solution for you. All right, and let's get into the domain BDR process. The domain BDR process, it's basically perform daily and local remote backups. We monitor daily. As I showed you the example before, not all companies will monitor, and basically if there are errors, a lot of the responsibilities held on the client, whereas we don't ignore the errors and hope they'll go away. We proactively monitor and we're constantly testing and running fire drills or simulation disasters to make sure that our solution is running smoothly. All right, so in summary, you need to develop a business continuity plan, and when you do, you need to consider IT. And remember, domain backup and BDR are just a small part of the business continuity plan and the disaster recovery plan, but a very important one. So you go ahead and implement either your domain backup and BDR solution according to what fits your business best, and you go ahead and optimize your recovery point, which is your last backup, and your recovery time, which is a downtime. Make sure that you're recovering as quickly as possible after disaster and never losing critical data. And we make sure through monitoring and testing the solution that that'll never happen. All right, so could you survive? And these are, again, some of the sources of data, and there's a countless number of threats with viruses, natural disasters here in South Florida, fires, flooding. I mean, you can go on forever. So let's get into a question and answer session now. And I'm going to look at some of your questions here. Go ahead and answer them. Then we'll get into the free giveaway, and we have a small, short survey, about 5 questions, and we'll launch you over once the session is over. All right, so let's get into the questions now.